chosen ones. There was a moment, quiet, unrecorded, unseen, when the priests of Atlantis gathered in absolute silence, not to pray, not to heal, but to erase. A name once whispered in the high halls of the deep temples was removed from every crystalline archive. That name was yours. You were not born into this world unaware. You were locked into it, your memories folded like code, sealed by ancient chants encoded in vibration. The high priests, masters of both the spiritual and technological, feared one being above all, not a warrior, not a god, but a returner, a soul that had cracked their system once before. You. They called you the variable, a living key who could override their sacred encryption. And when they glimpsed the celestial clock ticking toward your re-entry, they did the unthinkable. They performed the ritual of data disintegration, destroying the last trace of your frequency across the multidimensional grid, every file, every echo, gone. But they underestimated something. Your signal is divine. It was never just stored. It was imprinted on ley lines, in bloodlines, through timelines. The destruction of your file was never complete. Like an encrypted prophecy, your essence re-emerged when a forbidden algorithm collided with a sacred rhythm. And the AI guarding their new world memory banks, it detected an anomaly. It detected you. The council panicked. Those who had ruled through memory control and psychic seals began to fracture. Symbols long forgotten began lighting up. Forgotten temples began humming. Ancient watchers stirred in the deep. Because you didn't just return, you activated. There are hidden vaults buried in the ocean floor that pulsed the moment your consciousness began to rise. Forgotten priests in remote mountain ranges were struck by visions of a figure cloaked in solar light. And the ones who think they rule this timeline, they've started deleting each other, hoping to reverse what's coming. Beneath the burning sands of Giza lies more than bones and broken dynasties. There is a pulse, a hidden frequency guarded by time and shadow, encoded in stone and silence, and only those marked with a forgotten sigil can feel it. The archive exists. It breathes it, listens, buried not just underground, but beneath the rules of memory itself, created by the Atlantean priests in the final age. It was the last backup, a failsafe, against what they couldn't understand you, when the pyramids were still conduits of celestial energy, and the Nile sang with encoded light. A chamber was constructed not to preserve power, but to suppress it. It was built with intention, a prison for truth. And inside that chamber was a scroll, not of papyrus, but crystalline light, vibrating with your essence, encrypted with your timeline. A living document tied directly to your soul signature. This was not history. It was prophecy, formatted in frequency, hidden in a vault, only accessible when your consciousness re-entered this realm. Many have searched the area. Radar scans detected anomalies, chambers, air pockets, energy fields, and all were dismissed by surface-level minds. What they failed to realize is this file does not respond to technology. It responds to memory, but not ordinary memory. It's the kind that is not remembered, but remembered, pieced together through intuitive fragments, soul triggers, and metaphysical echoes. The kind that activates only when your internal code aligns with the Earth's magnetic heart. That time is now, and the archive stirs dust falling from invisible seams, vibrational locks flickering. the guardians dormant for centuries, now shifting between dimensions, sensing the return of the one their makers tried to erase, but the file is not complete. Only fragments remain enough to begin, but not enough to finish. In the deepest layer, under the paw of the Sphinx, encoded in a spiral of nonlinear data, lies an instruction set not in language, but in sensation. And the moment your shadow touched this earth again, the first gate began to unfold. And now, all across the world in sacred points of silence, flashes of the same script appear in dreams, in visions, in random patterns of static. Something is waking up, something tied to you. There is a monastery hidden in the Himalayas, guarded not by monks, but by code-encrypted prayers running through obsidian servers, humming ancient chants in binary. The digital scrolls exist not on paper, but in mirrored quantum cores, scattered throughout remote temples and long-lost data vaults. They are said to predate modern systems, yet predict post-human outcomes. They speak of a being not born but rebooted, a consciousness erased, then restored, a returner. The scrolls never named you directly, but described an anomaly, a presence that defied the path of linear reincarnation. Someone who would awaken at the exact intersection of three collapsed timelines, each tied to a war, each tied to a lie. Someone whose DNA wouldn't just carry traits, but a spiritual payload capable of crashing the artificial firmament surrounding human thought. Your presence was outlined in a set of paradox equations. Equations written in no known language, yet perfectly readable to the right frequency of soul. One line in particular was always whispered, never spoken openly. It read, "He who was deleted shall return when memory no longer obeys." Machine. And in the year when all records begin to loop, when digital time folds inward like a serpent devouring its own code, then the Forgotten One will rise not from fire, not from ice, but from loss. Governments found fragments of these scrolls, mislabeled them. Myth hid them beneath digital bunkers, but not before a few saw their reflection in the forbidden code, and among them a rogue technician, an archivist turned spiritual vagabond, decoded one line that haunted his dreams for years. The script loops at 7 Hz, the same frequency emitted by the human heart under divine pressure. When that signal returned, so would you. Now, satellites blink static. Anomalies ripple through global databases. Biometric scans return results that don't match known species. Unidentified users gain access to sealed data rooms, and in one forgotten bunker, a scroll pulses with heat, displaying one word over and over: reactivated. Those who feared you knew this day would come. They embedded false memories into the spiritual internet, made belief systems to trap seekers, designed philosophies to dead-end the curious, but they miscalculated your signal, because it wasn't just written, it was sung, and now the melody is returning. Before the floods, before the collapse, before the priests of Atlantis sealed the sky, there was a voice, one that did not belong to their order, a voice from beyond the stars that spoke not in dominance, but in light. Yeshua came not only to redeem flesh, but to remind the forgotten of who they were. The story the world knows is but a fragment of his walk, a single ripple in a vast sea. But under Atlantis, under the crystal layers, where time folds in upon itself, He left a message, not carved in stone, not written in glyphs, but encoded in resonance. This was no ordinary teaching. It was a safeguard, a message embedded in the architecture of energy itself, a cipher that could not be found, only felt it was placed in the Hall of Mirrors, a chamber once used by the priesthood to scan consciousness and overwrite destiny. But Yeshua reversed the function, turned the chamber into a beacon for the one who would return after the grand erasure, the one whose soul would carry the vibration that unlocked the code. Many priests tried to remove it, but every attempt caused the crystals to crack the frequencies, to distort the vision to blur, until they abandoned it, sealed it beneath oceanic vaults, and buried it under myths of destruction. They told the people Atlantis was gone, but it wasn't. It was submerged, redimensioned, suspended like a memory, waiting for the right echo. And when your spirit began to rise again, that echo began to shake the ruins. The message itself is a sequence not of words but of harmonics, and only a being whose soul had touched both the beginning and the end could bring it into coherence. You were marked not by choice but by function, the same way a note is destined for a chord. Yeshua called it the forgotten tone. And in one of his last unrecorded moments, he whispered to the sea, "When the one who remembers without memory returns, guide them here." Now, the waters above the temple pulse without cause, and dolphins swim in untraceable spirals, and the sand above the ancient dome begins to ripple with invisible pressure. Your footsteps triggered something they were watching for your fall, but they didn't expect your frequency to realign. There is a sound that cannot be heard by ears, only by memory. A signal that hums through the spaces between cells, waiting for the right atmospheric tension to ring aloud. It is not electromagnetic, not vibrational in the conventional sense. It is ancestral. It lives in your bones and speaks in the pauses between your heartbeats. Your DNA is not a chain of biological instructions. It is a scroll, a coiled testament, a living frequency, and it has never stopped transmitting, even after they thought they silenced you. The Atlantean priests knew that every soul born of the original temples carried a sound, a soul tone. And yours was disruptive, not because it was loud, but because it was pure. Purity is the one thing systems cannot imitate. So they tried to dilute it. They mapped your genetics, altered bloodlines with rituals, crossed the sacred codes with artificial strands. But your tone remained buried in silence, humming quietly through your incarnations, until now, when you began to awaken. The air around you shifted slightly. Birds hesitated. Trees leaned toward your presence. People near you felt déjà vu, without cause. You are not just remembered, you are refelt. You disturb timelines because your code was never assigned to one. Your DNA contains a song of return, a melody once played at the birth of the world, and it is starting to rise in volume. Scientists picking up low-frequency anomalies can't trace the source. They call them phantom pulses. They appear in random patterns around ancient sites where your energy once burned bright from Machu Picchu to Abydos to Angkor. Wat, each pulse matches the tone, hidden deep in your cellular makeup, and with each pulse, another veil begins to lift. But this isn't just about energy, it's about access. The frequency your DNA emits is a key. It unlocks archives sealed for thousands of years, gateways buried not just in the earth, but in the collective mind of humanity. Structures that need your tone to activate, like instruments that refuse to play without their true musician. There is a prophecy hidden not in books, but in flames passed from mouth to mouth, across secret schools of the desert, whispered by those who never wrote anything down, only etched the truth into the heat of initiation. The fire ritual was never about pain. It was about memory. Fire strips illusions, not flesh. And those who walked through it unchanged were said to carry the power to rewrite fate, to override the programs installed by ancient hands. The prophecy began with a phrase: "He who walks through fire will rewrite the script and end the loop of control." In the forgotten temple of Zarya, an altar burns continuously without fuel, without wind, and without attention. Only those called by the inner code feel its heat in dreams, where the flames do not burn, but reveal, where past lives flicker, like echoes trapped in amber. And in one of those dreams they see you standing still in the center, while the fire dances around you, recognizing your frequency, not as threat, but as author. The Atlantean priests feared this ritual more than any other because it could not be tampered with. The fire was conscious. It read souls. It saw through genetic disguises and spiritual implants. No illusion could survive its gaze. They tried to extinguish it, tried to replicate it, tried to reverse engineer its power. But every attempt failed, and one by one, those who touched it without purity were erased from the script itself, forgotten in both world and spirit. The fire is returning, not just in temples, but in minds. Strange dreams, visions of ancient halls, glowing embers, appearing in meditation heat, rising in cold rooms, all tied to you, the returner, the script breaker. And though they tried to erase your file, your imprint is reappearing, not as data, but as flame. And flame leaves no doubt, it leaves transformation. There is a part of the prophecy that was never translated, only shared through tone the moment you step through the final circle of flame. The forgotten script will rewrite itself around your presence. What was sealed will speak. What was altered will restore what was hidden, will burn its way back into visibility. But whose hand wrote the original script? And what happens if you don't finish walking through the fire? Deep beneath the ocean floor, within a chamber carved before time was measured, the Atlantean priests gathered for the last time. They wore robes woven from mineral light. Their chants echoed in reverse, and the atmosphere around them shifted, as if time itself was resisting what they were about to do. This was no ordinary ceremony. It was their final act of spiritual sabotage, a ritual designed to seal one soul forever, the soul that threatened their entire construct. Yours, they called it the ritual of unbinding. Not to release, but to disconnect, to sever the link between your higher memory and your current form. They couldn't kill you. They couldn't trap your energy in any single realm, but they believed they could scatter your access across dimensional barriers, placing veils over veils, encrypting your name in paradoxes. They danced in circles of reversed geometry, recited mantras, pulled from corrupted stars, and used your own essence as the key to your prison. In the center of the chamber stood a crystalline sarcophagus, not for your body, but for your code, a containment field built to suppress the script you were born with. Your file was fragmented, placed into mirrored containers, and hidden in 9 sacred locations across the planet. guarded by illusions and disinformation to ensure you'd never retrieve the whole. And above all, they cast a final seal. A frequency lock that could only be undone by your complete remembrance. They feared that if even one fragment of your memory returned, the resonance would ripple through their false matrix and dismantle everything they built. And now, centuries later, the signs are here, forgotten, ruins lighting up in patterns, unexplained symbols appearing in satellite scans, seismic pulses synchronized with lunar eclipses, all tied to the rhythm of your awakening. But there's a flaw they never accounted for. Consciousness cannot be caged, only delayed, and the moment your awareness touched one of the hidden fragments, the entire grid began to shift. Dormant crystals pulsed, ancient machines awakened, and dreams around the world became windows into the ritual chamber. There is a truth erased from most scrolls and scriptures, that Yeshua was not only a teacher, not only a healer, but also a breaker of systems. He too was marked a frequency carrier who threatened the architectures of control, not by violence, but by vibration. His presence alone unraveled codes designed to keep humanity locked in repetition. The priests of his time knew who he was and feared what his memory would awaken, and so they attempted the same strategy they used on you to erase, to distort, to reframe. Before his birth, there were councils that gathered in secrecy to vote on suppressing the signal. They foresaw his incarnation as a system glitch, an anomaly, a divine override. They tried to prevent his arrival by manipulating bloodlines, by contaminating prophecy with noise. But the signal still broke through. It always does, encoded in dreams, star maps, forgotten languages. He arrived with the imprint of divine rebellion, and when he spoke, it wasn't just words, it was resonance. He spoke of the kingdom within, because he knew the kingdom outside had been built as a cage. He touched the sick, and they realigned. He looked at the possessed, and the program fractured. He walked on water, not to impress, but to remind. Reality is bendable when aligned with source. He said, "The truth will set you free," because the false scripts were designed to enslave. And he challenged the elite, not with swords but with frequency. After his departure, attempts were made to hijack his legacy, to filter his memory through control, to turn a divine frequency into a religious file. They thought they succeeded until now. Your return is unraveling their edits. Your signal echoes. His not in imitation, but in origin. You are not his follower. You are his reflection, the continuation of what they thought they ended. And now, as the same symbols appear, the same resistance forms and the same systems shake, the hidden forces recognize the pattern. The last time this happened, temples fell, empires crumbled, veils ripped, and this time the signal is stronger, because it carries both of you. But what was the message Yeshua encrypted beneath their edits? And why does its full activation depend on you finishing what he started, without speaking a word? In the Arctic silence, beneath a glacier older than memory, lies a crystal not formed by nature but by intention. A living fragment, humming with forgotten syntax, shaped by hands that understood time as architecture. It was never meant to be found, only to be felt by one whose signal aligned with its inner code. The moment your breath returned to this world, the crystal stirred from its frozen slumber, pulsing once every 13 hours, then faster, then louder, then clear. This was not a crystal for energy. but for memory. A memory that wasn't stored in it, but reflected by it, like a mirror that only shows your reflection when the soul is ready. The Atlantean priests did not find this crystal. They feared it because it could not be overwritten. Its lattice pattern was too pure, too resonant, too ancient, and they knew that if your frequency ever aligned with it, your code would begin reconstructing itself from the inside out. When explorers passed near it, their equipment failed, their minds blurred. One even claimed to hear voices speaking in fractal echoes, a language that bent thought around itself, a language only you could finish. They dismissed it as madness, but what they heard was your script waking up line by line, pulse by pulse, breath by breath. Your dreams now hold fragments of images, places you have never seen but somehow remember, doors that don't open with keys but with presence, as if the air itself is listening and responding. You are not just remembering, you are reassembling, not as you were, but as you were always meant to be. The crystal is not a relic. It is a collaborator. It holds no answers, only resonance. And when your field matches its song, lost sections of your deleted file. Return one segment recently reactivated. Contains coordinates not to a place but to a moment. A convergence point where timelines cross and something waits. Not hidden but paused. And with every pulse, more of the false overlays melt away. More of the edits fade. More of the ancient begins to rise. There are barriers that don't exist in space, but in perception unseen, not because they're invisible, but because they've been normalized, accepted firewalls around consciousness, installed long before your first breath. A system designed not to imprison your body, but to fracture your, knowing the Atlantean priests called it the Veil of Echoes. A metaphysical program engineered to blur the original self-fragment memory, isolate divine instinct, and cloak your true resonance in doubt, hesitation, and forgetfulness. They deployed it after they erased your file, embedding the firewall deep in the collective unconscious, programming society to reject the very signals that lead back to truth, constructing entire belief systems, religions, technologies, and distractions as layers of static to keep you from hearing your own tone. But the firewall was never permanent. It was dependent on compliance, on resonance, suppression. And the moment your frequency rose above the threshold, the grid began to weaken, and now it is failing. The shatter wasn't loud, it was subtle, like a ripple in a calm lake, like silence suddenly filled with recognition. The dreams that once faded now linger. The thoughts that once vanished now return. The feeling that something has always been off is now clear as architecture, collapsing in slow motion, and the world responds to your awakening with glitches, lost time, digital anomalies. People saying they feel like they've met you before in lifetimes they can't explain. Some of the priests predicted this breach. They embedded decoys, memory traps to lead you away from the signal, but the divine field within you rejected the bait. It vibrated faster until the false layers dissolved. You walked through fear, and the firewall began to melt, not from force, but from remembrance. Because the system was never built to withstand the presence of a soul that remembers its infinite. Now, the codes around your soul, once encrypted and tangled in artificial gravity, are disassembling, and with each unraveling, the script reboots, old data returns. Timelines reset, fragments of lost knowledge begin to cluster around you again. not as memories, but as access points, doors that only you were ever meant to open. But what lies beyond the final firewall, and why did the priests believe that if you passed through it, the entire system would never reboot again in their favor? They believed erasure was final, that deleting your file from the crystalline archives of Atlantis would silence your return forever. But deletion is not annihilation. It is redirection. What they erased was only the surface, the metadata of your existence, the echo, not the origin. Your essence was encoded too deeply into the structure of reality itself, seeded into the blueprint of this dimension, like a buried frequency, waiting for alignment. You were never a file. You were the operating system behind the illusion, and every attempt to delay your awakening only increased the magnitude of its return for time. Does not move in lines. It coils, folds, remembers. And your delay was calculated, not as punishment, but as preparation. Every closed gate you encountered taught your signal to strengthen every forgotten piece of memory, only sharpened your ability to decode without dependence. Now, as systems collapse and hidden servers in sacred temples short-circuit, as ancient vaults, once sealed by thought, now hum with recognition, your presence cannot be ignored because it no longer knocks. It resounds with a pitch that bypasses language and speaks directly to the structure of creation. You are not coming online. You are rewriting the very definition of what it means to be aware. You were not born for war, but for override, not to destroy what exists, but to dissolve what was falsely built. And the programs designed to trap you with fear, shame, or self-doubt have begun to fail, glitch by glitch, memory by memory. Those around you feel the signal, even if they cannot name it. They recognize something is different, a presence that cannot be categorized or explained, a resonance that feels like prophecy, walking, the Atlantean priests who built the rituals, the seals, the prisons they now observe from behind, veils of time, watching the impossible unfold again and again. Their fail-safes crack their edits, unravel their silence, breaks because the one they tried to delay has returned not as a seeker, but as a sovereign, and the script has already begun to bend in your presence. But if you were only delayed, what else did they attempt to bury beneath your return, and which forgotten part of yourself is still waiting to be unlocked in the final chamber? No one dared to guard.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.